Good morning, everyone. We are ready to get started. Welcome to Contemporary Issues Sunday School class. We are pleased today to have Christine Little with us, our class member, retired high school teacher from Arapahoe, right?
Right, that's right.
High school was
Yes.
your main area. Let's talk about immigration, undocumented immigration in particular. So we will look at that category. But first, we want to welcome our Zoomers and ask you to mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen when you're not speaking. And we are recording this for future playback and other announcements. Anyone have anything else going on? Senior Vacation Bible School, is that what we call it?
VBS for seniors.
VBS for seniors. Yes, this week. That'll be fun. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
Yes, Linda.
Vote.
Vote with your mail-in ballot. That's right. Everyone should have gotten their mail-in ballots. Be a good citizen. That's right. And other summer things, summer travels. Anybody want to share where they're going soon? You know, the Castilians are going on a long trip to Eastern United States, and lots of other people traveling too. Okay. All right. Well, with that, let's turn it over to Christine.
Okay, first I want to wish all the fathers happy Father's Day
Yay.
today. You're very important. So I wanted to do that. And, you know, presenting in front of this class is very intimidating because you're all so intelligent and well-informed that I know I have to be prepared. So unfortunately, I think I got kind of carried away this time and I over-prepared. And so I had too much information. So I'm a little worried that I'm not going to get through it. But then I talked to Steve. I'm not going to try to rush through it. Whatever I get through because I want to have your comments and your questions too. So we'll just get through if you ever want to have a copy of the slides that we don't get through, I'd be happy to share them with you. First, I want to just
having a class instead of just a one-shot thing. Have you thought of having a class since you have so much information?
That would be fine. I'd be happy to do that.
I'd go through class.
Okay. Actually, you know, in this research, I was going to include detention centers. But as I learned more and more about the purchase and what was going on, I realized that really deserved its own presentation. And if anybody is interested in doing that with Steve's permission, of course, I'd be happy to share my information with you. But that's something we need to, I think every American needs to know what's going on in our name. In these detention centers. Yes. But even with that, I still have too much information. But let me just explain this to you. I thought I would, since all immigration services are under the Department of Homeland Security, I thought I would just give you this chart to show you how massive the Department of Homeland Security is. And remember, after 9/11, that there was a decision to take functions out of many other departments and put it into Department of Homeland Security. So on the left-hand side is the original agency. The middle is the department from which that agency was drawn, and then on the right are the functions of Homeland Security. So you see, U.S. Customs and Border Protection takes responsibilities from the Department of Agriculture, Justice, and Treasury. Just that one U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And of course, we have FEMA, TSA, Coast Guard, Secret Service, cybersecurity. So it's so important to have someone who is knowledgeable about managerial skills in leading this large organization.
Yeah.
On the next page, I thought I would just include our last effort to improve our outdated broken immigration system. If you might recall, this was a bipartisan, months-long plan that I itemized a few things, but it was very extensive and it was supported by both parties and it was ready to be passed. You'll notice here they had allowed money for more immigration judges to try to deal with the backlog that we experience, more for dealing with drug trafficking, and they really did streamline the asylum issue, which I'll talk about some of the problems there, and allowing some more authority for Department of Homeland Security. But this was on track to be passed. But remember, the Trump campaign did not want this to be passed. They wanted to use it as one of their main features. And so it did not get passed, which is a shame because they worked so hard on this, and it was a small step, not a fix by any chance, but certainly a step that we needed. But we're learning now that this administration was not really interested in immigration reform. They were interested in immigrant removal.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening now.
Yeah.
Then I included a couple of articles from the Week magazine. One on senior care, how Haitians in particular, and some immigrants who are under the temporary protected status might, if they lose their status, they may be easily deported, and many of them have gravitated to senior care centers. Haitians in particular, and nursing people in the nursing homes are concerned because they're concerned that they're going to lose a lot of their employees. And then the second article is from George Will. He's a conservative commentator of our generation that talks about in a positive way about immigration. But he does mention something here that I'll address. He says that there are about 8 million migrants entering the country, mostly through the asylum applications, and that really is incorrect. It's misleading. It's not that that anyone. I don't think George Will meant to do this, but I'll explain why that figure is misleading. Maybe politicians might want it to be misleading, but I don't think someone like George Will would want to propose that to be misleading. Then on the next 2 pages, I didn't realize there were so many different terms for how you can kick somebody out of the country or how you can not be in the country. But these are some definition of terms that describe ways in which you can be deported either voluntarily or involuntarily, or ways in which you can just not even be allowed to enter initially.
Christine, would you read a couple of those since our folks on Zoom do not have the handout?
Oh, okay. So there's deportation, which is what we're using now today, which just describes usually the forcible removal, involuntary removal. It might include enforcement return, which I'll talk about next. Enforcement return is where someone recognizes that they are trying to enter illegally or unlawfully, and then they say, okay, I will voluntarily leave, and then there will not be any removal order, which adds an added stigma to them, so that they will not have a formal removal order, that they will just voluntarily leave. We have a lot of enforcement returns. Administrative return is done by usually the Office of Field Operations, which is part of the border protection, but they're mainly at actual sites like airports and seaports and so forth. And here people may try to come in and realize they don't have papers, and then they'll withdraw their application to come in. Say, never mind, I won't try to come in, and then they can leave by administrative return, and also not have any kind of formal proceeding to get them to leave. Removal is very similar to deportation. This is involuntary. Expulsion was what happened during COVID. Both President Trump and President Biden were involved in that, where we did not allow people to come in because of COVID. And you'll see that in a chart that I have later. Many of them were just were expelled. They were not even allowed to come in. And then repatriation is just a catch-all for everything: removal and voluntary and involuntary. And so I have 3 charts here from a 10-year period that includes 3 presidents, most of Obama's presidency, and then Trump and Biden, of 3 different types of ways in which people could not come into the country. The first one, this was 2014 to 24, enforcement returns. And this just gives you by country how many were in that 10-year period left to do the enforcement. Remember, that is the voluntary. And then the next chart is administrative returns, where people may come in to the airport or so forth, and they then voluntarily leave. And then the final one, also for the same 10-year period, are removals, and that's by citizenship. And you can see the countries that, had the most people involved in those different types of returns.
So Christine, when it says citizenship, this is where these people are citizens?
Yes, where they came from. For example, in removals, the top one was Mexico. We removed more people from Mexico than from other countries.
And if they do a voluntary
Withdrawal.
enforcement return or an administrative, then that means they can apply to come back in, right?
Yes, there's no stigma. And I'll talk about coming in unlawfully, what happens.
Right,
to that.
okay.
Okay, I'll go to the next slide. So I'm going to focus on undocumented immigrants. I'll talk about some misconceptions about undocumented immigrants. I'll mention the refugees and asylum seekers, and then talk about the impact that this mass deportation policy has had on our country overall. If I have time, we'll look at a little more comparison of deportations by the past few presidents. And these are the sources that I use. I first started with Department of Homeland Security, of course. I used this book. If you're interested in immigration, I recommend reading that book. He includes the whole immigration process. And then a number of think tanks, mostly nonpartisan, nonprofit think tanks that track immigration. Okay, let's just go into some basic facts here. We think there are about 14 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. Now, I told you I would mention about George Will commenting about 8 million. You'll hear politicians say that under President Biden, 10 million people came pouring into our country illegally. This is really not correct, but it's a misconception. It's because the way the immigration officials track immigrants, they track them by what they call encounters. And it is an event, not a person. So they go by every single event. And it is true that there a lot of violence during this period, COVID too, that the immigration officials would say this is an encounter. And then people try to come multiple times. They don't just come once. They'll come again, and another month they'll try to enter. But each one of those entries is considered an encounter. Okay. So one person may be counted 10 times because they are counted by event. And that's why it's possibly true that there were maybe 10 encounters of people coming in. Most of them were rejected right off the spot. But I don't know whether politicians do this on purpose or not. Maybe they do, but saying that it can let us think technically it is correct. They didn't all come into the country, but they made a contact with our immigration officials. And the reason why I knew that is because the DHS estimated that they had about 10.5 million immigrants as of January of 2022. And so you look here, this is from Homeland Security and also Pew Research. The chart here, you can see about 2020, you had about 10.5 million, and then it jumped up. It did jump up under President Biden, but not by 10 million, probably maybe by 3 or 4 million. So largely that was due to the fact that he had a very ambitious policy for refugees and asylum seekers. Some would say too generous, but that's where a lot of the asylum seekers came in. And you can see on the chart below how they say that this increase was largely due to unauthorized immigrants with some protection from deportation. And that would include refugees and people with protected status that came in. So even now, it's estimated that we have about 14 million. If in fact there were 10 million that came in under President Biden, we would have 20 million undocumented immigrants, and no one is saying that. So this is about what we think it is.
Christine,
yeah,
can I ask a question?
Yeah,
if it's okay if we ask questions while you're doing. Absolutely. Is the general perception correct that Biden had a pretty much open border, a completely open border, that they could come across and get stopped by border security, and then their information taken, and the undocumented could just come on into America and then show up later at a court date to figure it out. That's kind of the perception a lot of people have.
That is, and I think that's largely because of the generous asylum seeking, but that is not true. He deported a lot, and I have figures that.
So a lot were just turned around and rejected right at the border?
Millions, yes.
Millions,
Yes,
okay.
see, I've got a chart that I'll show you. We'll make sure that we show that many were deported for a number of reasons. But because I think it's because of the asylum, Biden, I'll just mention it now. Biden had every president can determine a cap on asylum seekers, and his cap was 125,000. And we got nowhere near that came in. And even less that finally got accepted under that status. But the perception was that he did allow that, and that because of that, I think there was that perception. But no, there was definitely returns. I'll just say here that I've got Biden deported 4.6 million deportations, and that was 4.6 million, and that was removals, returns, and the expulsions under COVID.
So he didn't do a very good job of really explaining all that, did he?
Right.
And there's a kind of a consensus.
And he still let
now
a
that
lot
he
of
didn't,
people in,
and he still let a lot of people
you
in,
know.
but he
no
was not a
matter.
good communicator about his
Right.
immigration policy.
And also, and this goes back to a slide later on, there were a number of what we call gotaways. And that's where I think we get this. Gotaways were people who snuck in and that the border protection under surveillance knew that they were coming in, but they couldn't get them. And so under Biden, there were more of those. Now they've cracked down a lot more. And so that might be the perception too. That was not a big priority for him. It wasn't like, come on in, everybody could come in, but they were not, maybe the word got out that maybe they could sneak in, and there wasn't as much of a crackdown. And so there were gotaways that got in that way.
Christine?
Yeah.
This has been going on for a long time. I worked Country Dinner Playhouse, did HR and accounting, and we had an employee there who, at that time you ran information through the government database to make sure everything was on the up and up. Okay, his name was Jorge. We called him George. Wonderful kitchen worker. And one day, he'd been there before I hired him. He comes to me and he says, "I'm legal now." And this was, I'd been there for several years. I thought, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with this man? So he was a wonderful man, wonderful worker. So we terminated him under the old name and hired him under the real documents.
Oh my gosh.
And, that was around 2000 that happened.
But you also went through E-Verify, right?
I went through E-Verify, did everything the way I should have. And to this day, he'd go back and forth to Mexico. That's where his wife and children were. And, to this day, every time we talk about immigration, I remember George.
Didn't they lock you up?
Good story.
They did not. I took it to my boss and we talked, But
so when he said he was a citizen, did he present you with his green card?
He presented me with all the correct documents. So obviously, I have no idea where he got those documents. Probably somebody died. And
see, this is the problem. Because of that, many people slip through, and there are people working right now in meatpacking plants and in construction that the owner knows or doesn't want to pursue it because they need the workers. Whether E-Verify works or not, there are many that are working in many of these companies. We're sending mixed messages. We're saying don't come, but the businesses are saying we need workers.
You. Yeah.
So, and just to let's go back there to that,
Oh, boy.
previous, I just want to mention, in our workforce, we estimate that of undocumented immigrants, we have 22% farm workers, 15% construction workers, 8% workers in manufacturing, and of course, in many other businesses. But you think of, that's a large group of people that if, Stephen Miller kind of gets his way to get rid of so many, these businesses are going to end up suffering.
Restaurants, landscaping,
Yes.
oh, healthcare,
Picking lettuce.
House repair.
house repair,
And so,
roofing.
the reason why.
People who are cooking our hot dogs today.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, I just thought I'd give you a chart to show you where most of the undocumented, the country of origin for most of our undocumented immigrants. This is why there's a focus more on Hispanics or, Latinos. Because if you add Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America, that's about 72% of the undocumented immigrants. And there's others there. We have undocumented immigrants from Europe and Canada as well, but they're a much smaller percentage. So I think that's why there's the push first to go to the to deal with Hispanics. Now, we often talk about deportation, but I think it's important to note that 40% of our immigrants did not enter illegally. They were here already and then overstayed their visa. Now, with the backlog of our immigration system, they could really try to apply to renew their visa, and it just didn't get through in time. And so they're now don't have valid papers, but now they end up being undocumented while they might still be working through the system. And I don't know if this is really much of a concern to this administration, but 66% of the immigrants have been here for more than 10 years, and 45% have been more than 20 years.
I believe it.
So that's a large percentage of immigrants. It's not like automatically everybody's just rushing into our country, as you mentioned.
This is 25 years ago.
It's been for a long, long time. Yeah.
And then part of the reason is something that was in that bill that they wouldn't pass. There are not nearly enough judges to let the people in. Then those judges are working as hard as they can, but there's so few of them.
Yeah.
While we're speaking of judges, the Trump administration fired 100 immigration judges and then rehired other judges with no experience that were extremists, according to the Association of Immigration Judges. So, and now they're estimating that a judge might have maybe 5 minutes to adjudicate a case. So yes, the Reform Act did add a call for many more immigration judges. That's certainly a problem. But again, as I said, the concern is not to try to adjudicate or give due process. It's removal and detention.
Racism.
Right. All right. I thought it'd be interesting to show you kind of where the undocumented immigrants are. Colorado is kind of in the middle. We're at the 160,000 to 200,000. And we have about 100,000 workers in our state that work in our labor force, about 2.9% of our population. The top 5 states in order that have the most undocumented immigrants are California, Texas, Florida, New York, and New Jersey. And I find it interesting that these major campaigns were conducted in Los Angeles, Chicago, Minneapolis, New York. I didn't see any major campaigns in cities in Texas or in Florida, where they have the second and third largest number of undocumented
Because they're
immigrants.
Republican states.
Okay, time for some misconceptions here. Okay. Is residing in the US without authorization a crime? Technically, no, it is not a crime to be in the United States. It is considered a violation of, and that's why you'll notice I'm not using the term illegal alien. I'm using the term undocumented or unauthorized immigrants. DHS has all over their website illegal aliens. But it's a violation of federal immigration law, that's true, but not considered a violation of our criminal law. In other words, you're probably not going to go to jail. That's why those who are undocumented go through immigration court and they don't go through our criminal justice system. However, if you are removed and you have a remove order, and then you try to enter illegally without going through the process, that's a felony. And then you get in trouble. Okay, another misconception is all these undocumented immigrants are voting. Again, that is very, very rare. This, according to our laws, this is a felony. This is not a misdemeanor. It is a felony if you even register to vote if you're not a citizen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you try to vote, then you're in big trouble, and of course you can get deported.
Yeah.
The Heritage Foundation, which is a very conservative group, they conducted an extensive study and did not find any appreciable number of immigrants voting. In fact, it was, in mathematicians, you can help me with this figure, below 0.0001%. So is that 1/10,000th
Yes.
of a percent? Okay, 1/10. So that's kind of small. And then even the Brennan Center, which is a more liberal nonprofit, they also did an extensive study. They also found the same very rare 0.0001 cases. And then the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who actually wrote a book, and famously he was asked to find a number of extra votes and was accused of having undocumented and dead people voting and so forth. He actually charted his 8.2 million Georgia voters, and then he found 20 non-citizens and only 9 had tried to vote out of 8.2 million. So there again, it was very, very rare. So think of it from the perspective of an immigrant. If you're here illegally, it's a misdemeanor. If you try to vote, it's a felony, and you could go to jail. So first of all, giving your information, you may not, though our state might know who you are, you may not want to give your information. And then if you get caught, you could go to jail and you could lose any chance of ever becoming a citizen. Yeah. So it's not worth it to them. Well, why take that chance? Yeah. And that's one reason why it's not rare. I guess I would just ask the people who continue to perpetrate this to show me the numbers. If there's people, where are the names? Why aren't they getting prosecuted? My daughter's a chief prosecutor, and she would not win many cases if she told the jury, I have all this information about this person he's guilty, but I don't have any information to show you. But believe me, he's guilty. She would not win many cases. Yeah. So that's kind of what they're expecting us to do. We don't have any information, we don't have any evidence, but just believe us. Okay. Another misconception is that the undocumented immigrants are getting Social Security and Medicare. That again is not true. In fact, the opposite is true. They do pay in because they work. If they have a working permit, they will pay in to Social Security, Medicare, but are not eligible. And even these agencies insist that that is not the case. Yeah. There are errors, but not in errors involving this. There's other errors, but not people getting payment where they are not citizens. They're really pretty strict about that. But undocumented immigrants pay $16 billion a year into Social Security and the Medicare systems, and then they do not get the benefits of that. They are also not eligible for many other federal welfare services. That might depend on different states. Some different states might have allowances for that.
California has different, more liberal giving of benefits to undocumented.
That's right. And so it depends by state, but generally they're not allowed. They are, though, eligible for the emergency care. If you go to the emergency room, everyone, that's by law, can get care. And then what we call WIC, which is nutritional support for women, infants, and children. They are eligible for that. They're also eligible for some free lunch programs. And of course, they go to public schools, but then they pay taxes for the public schools as well. And then another misconception, undocumented immigrants are a drain on our economy. This is from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy that says in the year of 2022, undocumented immigrants contributed $96.7 billion in taxes. That includes federal and state taxes that we get. So that, just like with our taxes, helps us support teacher salaries, bridges, roads, and other services in our individual states. So that's a lot of money for undocumented workers. The U.S., if Stephen Miller wants to deport 1 million undocumented immigrants a year. He didn't meet that in 2025. I don't know if he's going to meet in 2026, but if the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy kind of track that out, if 1 million immigrants do get deported, we could lose $8.9 billion in tax revenue. And interestingly, if 40.2 billion more would be taken in if all of our undocumented population had a work authorization, and that we would generate more money in taxes. Again, more information on mass deportation and the effects on the economy. If we do undocumented workers to make up 5%, which is about 8.1 million people, our gross domestic product could be reduced if all undocumented immigrants would remove, but that's unlikely that we're going to remove all 14 million undocumented immigrants. But that's just saying we would lose possibly $4.7 trillion. On the other hand, if the long-term undocumented immigrants were given a path to citizenship, we would increase our GDP by $1.7 trillion. That again, probably is not going to be realistic, that we may not give a lot of the undocumented immigrants citizenship, at least not in the near future. On the other hand, even though undocumented immigrants pay in, they also take money out of the country. And that should be an estimated 200 billion leave our country and get in support of families abroad. And the main recipient countries are Mexico, India, Guatemala, Philippines, and China. Now, when we think, that's a lot of money going out. However, that money might stabilize families there so that they might be less likely to have to come to the United States just to seek help. So it's double-edged sword there. But that money, routinely, a lot of people come specifically to work, and then they send money back to their families.
That's what Jorge did.
Did he? Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot.
Eight children every time he went home to visit them. Another child.
He shouldn't visit that much.
You know what he was doing when he went home.
Exactly.
Anyway, give them a membership.
That's true.
Very good.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about asylum seekers and refugees, and here's where, according to a very old system that was designed in 1965, that I'll show you in the next slide, a president can determine, there's no limit, the president can determine how many asylum seekers asylees and refugees could come in, get invited in. And then, of course, they have to go through a process to get accepted. So just because you get invited to be doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get accepted. But the problem is there's a huge backlog. So they may get coming in for refugee status and then have to wait even for 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, to find out whether they get that status or not.
Christine, does asylum generally mean people asking for entry because they've been persecuted or threatened in their home country?
Here's the difference. Refugees are people that have been persecuted and they're out of the country, and they're asking for refugee status. Usually asylum seekers are people within the country that are asking them for asylum because, my country, I'm here because there's violence in my country, but generally that's the difference. Asylum seekers are in here and they become asylees if they get accepted. Okay. So we have both refugees and asylees. Yeah.
Okay. They don't want to go back because it's dangerous or. It's not just that they want a better life, they're afraid to go back.
Right, and they usually have to demonstrate that.
Okay.
Usually a civil war or there's famine, gangs, things like that. Now, the temporary protected status was given to many of these people. And the Trump administration has rescinded the temporary, the TPS for Afghanistan, Cameroon, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And I just learned that Venezuela has also been rescinded. That was a few months ago, so that's corrected. They're no longer in limbo. Ethiopia, Syria, and Myanmar are still in limbo, as are the Haitians and others. So they don't know whether they're going to be once you get it rescinded, then you're illegal automatically. Then you can be arrested and deported. So this is why they're worried.
Jim's got a question.
Yeah, Jim.
Isn't the president trying to take away native born citizenship?
Say it again, Jim.
Isn't the president trying to take away native born citizenship?
I think there's talk about taking away citizenship of naturalized citizenship, maybe native born too, but I heard naturalized citizens, people who are naturalized that went through the process legally, and maybe they might find some reason to rescind their naturalization. I don't know if that's legal. That certainly is going to be challenged in court. So that hasn't happened, but I've heard talk of that. I haven't heard about native born. That would be another thing that maybe what excuse they could say for that. Has anyone heard that native born?
He's trying to take away the 14th Amendment that says that if you were born in the USA, you are a citizen, because he's trying to say if you are not a citizen that gives birth, that does not make your child a citizen. That's what he's trying to do.
So it wouldn't be retroactive, of course. I wouldn't think.
He's trying to make it.
Okay. So that could be a problem. Okay, the next slide. So this is this chart that was in this book here, and this was made in 1965 in the Johnson era. Wow. And we are still abiding by many of these caps. It was revised a little bit in 1990, but even then, it's old. And you'll notice there under humanitarian refugees and asylees, there's no limit. But look, if there are limits for others, and this is the problem with getting proper visas. Visas for people that we need to come in, maybe trained visas, doctors, researchers, and we have a cap on that, and a country might have a cap on it. So this was devised when our population was 192 million. Now it's about 349 million, or another source says 342. Nevertheless, we have far more people, and we're still abiding by this old system. And that's where the immigration reform, I think, tried to address some of those problems, the bill that didn't get passed.
Was that quota system set up in 1965 to overturn the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1924?
I think so. Yeah, that was part of that. Yes, which was very strict. Yeah. Okay, this really surprised me. My vision of refugees and asylees they're poor, they're desperate, but I didn't realize that they contributed so much to our economy. So the International Rescue Committee put this out, that their data says from 2005 to 2019, refugees and asylees contributed $123.8 billion in net fiscal benefit. They generated $581 billion in revenue, which far exceeded the $457.2 billion in services that they received. So, when they come in, they may get services, they may get resettlement assistance. I just didn't realize that there was a net gain for us to accept these refugees and asylees. And then it goes on to talk about the billions of dollars in household income, taxes paid, and spending power because of these people that we bring in. And I just thought I'd have a chart. This was during the Biden administration, to give you an idea of those who were granted asylum in just the year 2023. Most of them were Afghanistan, and then it drops down. 26% were given granted asylum, and then down to China was the second one, 8.9. Now, this pie under the Trump administration is going to look very different, as I'm going to show you in just a minute. Over the past year, Department of Homeland Security has stripped 2 million legal immigrants of their parole, and parole means that they are they're given permission to be in the country legally, and temporary protected status. So now that's 2 million people that are to be arrested or detained and deported. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the restrictions involving this mass deportation policy. I mentioned about the judges, firing judges. We already talked about that. Judges now are well overwhelmed, and there's not much of an interest. People are trying to get court cases, and it's just the backlog is many months, if not years. And then for asylum, here's a major change. Remember, the president can set the number of refugees and asylum seekers that come in. This administration has decided that they really don't want people of color to come in. So from October 2025 to March 2026, 4,499 refugees were settled. Of that number, 4,996 were from white South Africa, white Afrikaners, and 3 were from Afghanistan. Now, this is supposedly under humanitarian reasons, and the claim is that they're killing us or there's violence. But white South Africans are 7% of the population, and they own 70% of the land. So it's hard to demonstrate that they're discriminated against. Sure, there's violence, but not necessarily targeting them. But these people can come in just by saying that they're discriminated, but they don't have to prove it. Normally, people have to prove and demonstrate. They have not had to prove that they are in dire danger for coming in. And then this Trump administration has raised, rather than 125,000 that Biden had, he has a cap of 17,500, but most of them are going to be reserved for the white South Africans.
Why do the white South Africans want to come here?
I don't know. In fact,
they have land and money over there, why do they want to come here?
I don't know whether they're. In fact, I just read an article yesterday that someone said they're going to come back. That said that not that we're not a great country, but that they feel that people are being recruited to come. I remember Elon Musk is from South Africa, so is Peter Thiel and David Sachs. So you've got a lot of influence there. But that's a good question. They might be coming in and then realize, hey, I like the climate better in South Africa, but that's a Mediterranean climate. And many of them are coming to Texas, which is definitely not a Mediterranean climate.
I have talked to a couple South Africans, and a lot of the white Africans the racial tension is so great there, and particularly violence between blacks and whites, that many of them on their estates have walls with high voltage electrical wires on the top. I'm also told by one Afrikaner that when he and his wife leave the farm to go into town, they take separate cars. In case one of them gets ambushed, the other will survive and not leave the kids as orphans. So there is danger, and they perceive it, and it's very real.
Yes. Not genocide, but certainly danger. And that's unfortunate that crime is not, they're not, and maybe it could be the resentment of owning 70% of the land. Still, even though the apartheid system has been technically abolished, it seems like they're still operating in the apartheid system. And there's no excuse, but there's a reason for that violence. So we'll see if they enjoy Texas.
Christine, could we take a break for just a minute and ask our Zoomers if they have any questions?
Yeah.
Just want to see if Susan's on there. Susan, can I just ask you for a second about Canada? What is I know you're up on social issues. What's the immigration situation in Canada?
We're dropping the numbers of people that we're allowing into the country and the categories, because we have a lot of people from all parts of the world here, and then they can sponsor their families. And so overall, we're reducing the number of students and family members, and not, I don't know how significant it is, but it's a reduction. And that's primarily driven by the cost of living and housing, because the feeling is, we're bringing a lot of people in and it's driving the costs up, and we don't have the systems in place to accommodate, but the whole country is built on immigration. So we've got to kind of get a handle on it.
Yeah, there was just a big story in the news about Switzerland trying to cap their immigrants to 10 million because of the impact on the economy and also the discrimination against immigrants. Yeah,
But
changing the culture.
But it failed.
Yeah, but it failed. Is that right, Eric? Okay, yeah. But the right-wing politicians tried to cap the number coming in because they said
I thought it was
disrupting
their
the economy
population they
and
wanted to limit.
what, Linda?
I thought it was the population.
For the
they-
population of the whole country
Yeah.
to 10 million. Okay, that's right. That's right.
Here's
But
the-
that also included immigrants. Well, somehow that included the numbers of immigrants coming into Switzerland.
And here's the problem with all countries, especially aging countries like ourselves. We've been below a replacement rate for a number of years, like 1.6 fertility rate when we should have 2.1. And European nations are dealing with this too. And yet you can't accept everybody. And so you have a problem. You want to you need workforce. And as I showed you on our population pyramid, we need workers to come in. But then again, with all the violence and wars and where we can't accept every country that wants to come in. And that's why it's important to have caps that are reasonable and a better system, a system that streamlines the type of immigrants that can come in. But every country's dealing with that. And it's a valid understanding. You have strange people coming in, that's unsettling to many, and yet you need the workers.
The Netherlands elected a right-leaning prime minister last year for that reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
Say it again so everybody can hear.
The Netherlands elected a right-leaning prime minister last year because the people were upset about all of the immigrants coming into their country.
Yeah.
With a social welfare system like the Netherlands or Norway or Sweden or Denmark, those people are paying taxes for all of these incoming immigrants.
Socialized medicine and.
Yep.
Same in Germany.
Subsidies, like in Norway, subsidies for farmers, subsidies for people having children, subsidies if you want to go to college. It's a cradle to grave welfare system.
Yeah.
Do they though have the immigrants pay taxes as well?
I think they do.
Yeah.
I would think they should. They can't afford to support all of without paying tax.
Microphone there. Mary, grab the microphone for Gene. Thank you.
Steve, we have some good friends over in Sweden. Same issue.
Yeah.
The Sakid on CNN, that members of you are familiar with, said that, we need to do a better job of acculturation. Many, unfortunately, God bless them, immigrants are accustomed to dictators, like authoritarian kind of government. Democracy is kind of soft and wishy-washy. We just need to stop and let things stabilize, get a homeostasis there, particularly around the values and processes of democracy and what that entails, because many of these folks have no concept. And I think part of Donald Trump's charisma was the fact that he represented something that was more familiar in many ways than espousing the American dream. And so there again, it seems to be a universal issue, not just in Europe, but certainly in our country as well.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I wonder if our cultural anthropologists could address that acculturation, because my daughter had a situation where a Mexican came in, and in Mexico you're used to bribing police officers. And so he was what he did in the country, he tried to bribe a police officer, and my daughter said, you don't do that in this country. But that's a good point. So I'm wondering, it is a problem. We need workers, but yet how do you get a system where people can feel part of that country and yet still the gradual transition period is kind of very tenuous.
Well, since you're nice enough to note that I'm here, thank you for that, Christine. so impressed with the quality of your research. It's marvelous.
Yeah.
I actually have 3 points that I'd like to share with our good friends here that build nicely on what you're sharing. And they do relate in a general way to adaptation and of course cultural diversity and what we're promoting. I had the privilege of starting to work with refugees in 1975 when the Vietnam War was coming to an end. And I began working with Vietnamese refugees coming to Colorado, which was my pleasure in a nonprofit capacity, and doing some research about their adaptive issues as they tried to settle in places like Sun Valley, where a number of initially, and you folks know, remember Sun Valley, not far from the Broncos Stadium. Then a few years after that, for the state of Colorado, I was asked to coordinate a federally funded program for documented immigrants, many of whom, as you can guess, were from Mexico and Central America, documented immigrants who needed mental health care. And I was working for the Colorado Division of Mental Health in an administrative capacity. I'm not a counselor, but I was working in an administrative capacity. And we had a program. I won't give you the acronym because it was too long, but briefly, it was under the short acronym, mental health care for documented immigrants through the various mental health centers that we have throughout Colorado, which we have many. As you folks know, community mental health centers scattered throughout the state. It was a kind of affirmative action, if you see where I'm going with this in terms of adaptation and what we do, because these people got care and it was funded by the feds through the state, and I coordinated that. This was good because they might not have gotten care, mental health care, if that program hadn't been in place, because most of them were impoverished and did not have money to go to, say, a private therapist. I was quite excited to work with that program. I wish it continued. But you'd see the problem with that kind of program. It wouldn't go now under Trump because he'd call it racist, because he'd say some people are being singled out for care and other people aren't. Of course, I thought it was a wonderful program. And the third thing I wanted to share, which you were hinting at in terms of the deportation and the sending of people elsewhere, nearly a dozen African countries have contracted with the United States to receive certain people being deported under the various clauses that you have nicely outlined. For example, an Iranian woman is being sent to the Central African Republic. I hope she survives. I'm not sure she will. We have this program of ominous deportation to countries of many of these people. I think it is one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen. So thanks. Those are the three comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Patty, go ahead.
On the subject of deportations, I've got an emergency situation that's really urgent to me that I'd like to share on this exact subject. I have a dear friend who is a pastor from Uganda. He escaped during the Idi Amin era. He has been seeking asylum in the process, and then he didn't make it all the way through the process. And he has been in the process of getting legal status for years. He is now in ICE. They picked him up on the courthouse last September. He's 78. He has been a friend of our families for over 20 years. And just to give you an example of this guy, he is here he is at the bedside of my daughter when she was at Children's Hospital. Here he's praying for her. He is very fluent in English. He is highly educated. And here he is with my son at the museum. We socialized. And here he is again. The kids just adored him. So I just found out about his plight a couple months ago. And there are 2 lawyers working to get him out of the Aurora Detention Center. And we were just told on Friday that he's being deported on Thursday. He is in very poor health, and I am looking for anybody who has a connection to Jason Crow's office or any other connection. The lawyers are trying to get an immigration hearing for him tomorrow. And they are getting letters. I've written, a lot of people are writing letters in his behalf. But if you know anybody you know, like Jason Crow's office or anybody else that could help us save this guy, I mean, on the subject of how much he's contributed, he has been saving, he's been a hard worker. Has been sending money to AIDS orphans in his country, in Uganda, for years. And he also, has been doing ministries with men who were just recently out of incarceration and so forth. But, if anybody would like to pray for him, I've got his name, I've got his address. If he doesn't get kicked out on Thursday, he could receive a letter of encouragement from many of us. And so that's one thing that I've got, but it just is putting a face on one of the thousands. They have thousands of these people out there. Many of them are business owners who now their businesses have failed. All their employees are now unemployed. All of the children, the wives and children are being deported. I mean, are back here unsupported now. And a lot of them are American citizen kids and often American citizen wives that have, and the husbands are being sent back. So this is something that is weighing really heavily on me right now. And if anybody has any good idea about how to help somebody, or would just like to write it or pray for them, I would sure appreciate it.
Thank you, Patty. Sure.
Thank you. Now, speaking of being,
Could she give that information to you, Steve, and you send it out to the class?
Sure, I will. Yeah, good idea.
speaking about being deported into Central Africa, the next slide here, there are, even though many Afghans have come to the country, there are still many that are in limbo in Qatar, waiting they're already vetted and they're already cleared to come to the United States, but they're being held up. And Jason Crow, our representative, wrote a letter to the Department of State on behalf of 82 lawmakers saying, why are these people not coming in since they've been vetted? I just learned that 10 days ago, 40 migrants, including many Afghans, were deported to Central African Republic, which is borders South Sudan, which is in a civil war, and Democratic Republic of Congo, which has an Ebola outbreak. Right. So, good luck to them. But so they've been deported, and even Biden, though, I have to say, he left many Afghans in limbo as well. Restrictions.
Christine, I'm sorry, we only got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
We can do another session with you.
Okay.
I know we have more slides to show.
Let me just go to, let's see, how about go to slide 28. I'll just quickly show you that.
Okay.
This relates to the different methods of deportation, I told you. This is a chart that shows the different returns we talked about from 1993 to 2024. So let's start with, like, you think Obama, you could see there that many of the deportations, and this goes by the millions, or were some were removals. The blue is removals, and the solid purple is returns, and enforcement returns is kind of the checkered and lighter. And then as we go into the Trump and Biden administration, notice about 2020, the green, that was COVID. That's when they expelled people. They didn't even let anybody in. And then in Biden's first 3 years, there were a lot of expulsions due to COVID. They were just stopped at the border. So you get an idea of the number of deportations. Biden did have quite a few deportations, and President Trump both. And so most of the presidents have had to deport because we have so many people. Think about just 10 million encounters that I said before. It's constant, and people keep on coming and coming. I kind of feel for these agents in a way, because it can be very stressful, especially when there's not much relief when people do come in. And I'll just mention, first of all, any questions in the last, we just got 1 minute, so maybe we'll just leave it to, rather than go on, if anyone has any other comment or question. Let me just go to the next one.
Yeah.
How about slide 24? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, 24. I just end with that. This surprises me. and I'll tell you why. The Cuban population has been very consistently in support of Republican candidates. So I was very surprised to see that the arrest of Cubans has increased by 463%. And there's a special law for Cubans that they can apply for green cards after 1 year. But yet the green cards and asylum approvals have just plummeted and decreased by 99%. So maybe it's with this relationship with Cuba that, we're trying to take over Cuba or something, but I don't think this would win many friends with the administration when so many of the Cubans are being arrested and detained, many of them in Alcatraz, and many of them, the whole thing.
Alligator Alcatraz.
And they're kind of stuck there. And people get paid by the day for people being in there. They can't go to their home country. And so they're kind of just resting there. So that's just kind of an added thing.
Well, thank you, Christine, for a great presentation and discussion.
I also was trying to do some research on detention centers and then realized, this is really serious. And if anybody in the class would like to take that on with your approval, of course, I'd be happy to share my information with you if you would like to do a lesson on detention centers, because we really do need to be informed about what's going on. As Americans, as Christians, this is just so important.
I have something on that, Christine. Thank you for mentioning it. I don't need the microphone. I'll just speak loudly. By total coincidence, I had the pleasure just this past week of participating in a podcast on detention centers and on the history since World War II of incarceration and detention, such as the Japanese Americans that we're well aware of in World War II on up to the present day. If you folks would like to listen to our podcast, you can find it by going to Spotify, going to Never Again, and with it, there's different Never Agains that you'll find on Spotify. Ours would be found within Coalition Against Global Genocide. So sponsored by the Coalition Against Global Genocide is the Never Again podcast series. There's a number of podcasts. And within that series, our most recent is on detention just this past week.
I'll send that out to the class. The
Yes.
link to that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Good discussion.
Thank you.
See you next week. Thank you. Very good.
We got most of it done. I didn't get to deportation.
And do another
We
one.
addressed it. I had just the statistics with that chart.
My brother-in-law, 7 years to get his U.S. citizenship. 7 years.
So many good things. Yeah.
Seriously, if someone wants to do detention.
I took she lived up there for a couple of years. Graduated. How long you held high school? Went to Metro, graduated. We worked with